Folks, in the previous video, we had covered the front end of our noting application, namely the login register and homepage sections. So we can see those right here, how we've done them. And today we're going to cover how to go about handling that in the backend. So today, right now, we're going to, in this video, cover. So for example, if we wanted to first do the register one, first things first, of course, we want to check if the form is being submitted. How do we do this? We do if request.method is post. Then we know that a post request is coming in. Then we know that somebody has pressed this button, okay, because it's a post form, and when it's submitted, it's automatically going to come to us as a post request. Okay, so what should we do now? We would expect a couple of things. First, we would expect the name, because we know that we have this field. And what is the name? It's request.form.get with name. But how do we know it's name? Name. Like, what if it's what if we called it something else? Let's go ahead and check here. It is called name. The name is name, and the name is email for the email field, and the name is password. I do remember we've done this as simple as that, so we can proceed with that. So that's the name field. So we're getting the value of this here, and then we have the email equals request form get email, and this one will get the value of whatever the user inputs in here. And now we could do the password, which is request form get password, which is whatever the user will put in here. Okay, cool. If any of these are empty, in other words, if name is empty or if email is empty, like an empty string, if the person hasn't put anything in there, or the password is empty, what do? We should tell the user, hey, I was about to say, hey, you have left some fields blank. Please ensure you have typed name, email, and password correctly. Okay. In a better program, you could tell, like, you could do an if condition for the name and then return, hey, you have left the name empty. Hey, you have left the email empty. Hey, you have left the password empty. By the way, this is one way to do things. We're going to cover how you can even do it better in future tutorials using Flash, using the flashing messages. I'm having a flashback myself at the moment. Have we used flashing messages in the past? Let's quickly check that. I don't think we have. Just a moment. Yeah, it doesn't look like we've done that, so we can just use this, and in the future we'll also go over flashing messages, which is a bit more commonly used, but for now we'll just keep it simple. We want to get to the functionality of things. So it says if they've left the name, email, or password, you left some fields blank. As I said, you can put one for each. For example, you could do if name is empty, then return you left name empty, yada yada. We're not going to do that because that takes too much time. We'll just do it like this for now. Okay, so hypothetically speaking, okay, if you leave everything blank, or email is additional if there. When we hit register, it says you left some fields blank. Okay, so we go to the register page again. We know that the blank thing works. If we put 123 here, we left the password blank. So it tells us that. And if we do put 123 in everything and we hit register, for now it doesn't do anything, but that's what we're about to code. Cool. So we've checked that condition. The second condition we should check is, that's actually all the conditions for the register, I think. Then we can now just call this register user here. From previous tutorials, we've coded this register user. We've made it into a function, but when you call it, it'll be the same thing if you were to do it over here. But we did just make a function out of it in the previous video or the video before that. So we're just going to go ahead and call that the register user function, which is expecting from us a name, email, and password. And we have to give it in that order. Name, email, password. Right. So now this will register us a user. And ideally, we would want to also have, like, return this true, or there's some type of logic here that does like a try except. Sure, let's put that in there. So we're gonna try to make a user, okay? And in the case that we're not able to make one, all right, it's gonna return false, okay? Because if the return of this is a false, we'll be able to check if the user was not registered. And we could also do exception as E to see why the reason is, but maybe we don't want to show that to the user. Maybe that's going to reveal some information about the database or something. We'd want it printed to the console, for example. We could do printf ran into issue while trying to register user, and it could simply tell the issue as well right there, and it will return a false. This is completely optional, but I'm just showing how to use the try except here, because I don't think that it's going to be worthwhile to do a Flask series video. This is more like a Python knowledge, but yeah, this is a good practice to do something along these lines, but obviously something much more robust than this in real life applications. Anyways, we do now have register user. It gives the name, email, and password. Normally, we would also want to check if the email exists in the database. We're not going to check that at the moment. Actually, in that case, this will already capture that error, 99%. So that should be fine. Okay, we register the user. Now we can do success, or maybe like user ID, since that's the way that we originally had coded this, new user.id. We could just do true. Let's just make it. So either register user will return a true or a false. If it returns a true, then we know we've done things right. So we could do success. If the success is true, then we register user. If success, or you could also do if success is true. It's a bit more readable, but this does the same thing. You could do return successfully registered. You can now log in using, and we can put the login link here actually. We just do an href/login and login page. There we go. And using the login page. And we could just do the period like that. So otherwise, we can return ran into an issue trying to register. Okay, this is a pretty decent form. Okay, let's try this out. So we have, for example, meho, and we could do meho@gmail.com, and we just register. Successfully registered. Let's go ahead and do meho with meho@gmail.com again. Ran into issue while trying to register, and you can see that it says to us integrity error from SQLite, unique constraint failed. Now this is like a miscellaneous error that we caught using our try except, and the exception as E, where we did ran into issue while trying to, you can see that that's printing to us the program itself. It's not telling this to the user. Why is this not telling this to the user? It's not good practice to tell the user SQL insert into user yada yada, values yada yada. Especially if this is somebody who is ill-intended, they could use this information to try to compromise our database, try to get some attacks going on in our database, which is obviously not something we would want. Cool. So ideally what we should do, however, which we're going to now cover as well, if the fields are blank, then warn the user that it's blank. And now if user.query.filterby email equals email, if there's somebody with this email already, .first, so we're using the user.query, we're querying the users, we're filtering by the email equal to the email. This email here is this, by the way. This one here is this one. So if what the users put is actually equal to an existing user, .first. So if there is such a user, that's what .first does. It takes the first user that matches these parameters, and if it does match these parameters, you know that somebody has registered using this email address in the past. So in other words, if this is true, is not none. Okay, if there is somebody like this, right, then what we can do is we can say return someone already registered using that email address. I'm hoping that this part is clear. If it's not, I'll just go over it very quickly again. So we're basically checking filter by email equals email. Filter by email, what the filter by method does for the query, user.query, is it essentially checks, okay, this email attribute of the user. In other words, the column email in the database. Is there any rows where the email is equal to what the user input? And the way we do that is we just get the first row that the email is equal to what the user put. And if it is not none, in other words, if there is at least one row, because we did that first, then we know somebody already registered using that email address. Cool. Okay, so now when we try to do this again, it will tell us someone already registered using that email address. See? We can try this again. We can just do m this time for... And now we're properly handling specifically that case as well. We could have handled it in our try except as well, but we're taking too much time in this segment. So, and this is the proper way to do it, really. So we're just going to move on with things now. Now onto the register page, because we did register using meho@gmail.com. We want to now log in using meho@gmail.com. When we try right now, nothing happens because we haven't coded the form yet. What I'm going to do actually is I'm just going to copy paste this entire segment for post, and we're just going to edit it on the go because a good portion of it is going to be the same. First things first, we don't have a name field, so we can remove that one. We're just dealing with email and password. And same here, if name, we're not checking for that anymore. And ensure you've typed email and password correctly. There we go. And we're now going to query if... Okay, this is where things get a little bit different. So I'm actually going to delete after this segment, and we'll just retype that whole segment. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to check for an existing user. The same thing we did really previously, but we just needed the existing user in one line previously. Now we're just going to reuse that, so I'm going to save it into a variable. Existing user is user.query.filterby. Anybody who has this email, so we've already explained this in detail earlier, so I'm not going to go over that again. But basically, we're just saving this existing user, the first user that has this email, into a variable called existing user. Now I could see if existing user is not none, okay, if there is such a user in the database, then if existing user.password is equal to password. So it's a bit confusing because I keep using email, password. Like anybody might be like, what is this? If you have a lot of Python knowledge, you probably are understanding what's going on here. But if you're relatively new to Python, you might be a bit confused. So let me just go over this very briefly. So basically, user has an attribute password, just like user has an attribute email. We are also collecting password from this request form. So this password variable on its own is this field's value. Whereas this existing user.password is this existing user's password attribute. We're grabbing this from the database, right? This is coming from a row in the database, which we have filtered out this user already. So basically, since we already took this user email, we're now going to check, does the existing user's password equal the password that the person put here? And if we do this, we're going to return, you have successfully logged in. You can now access the home page, which was already accessible, but that's fine. The home page. Maybe we can have some additional content there. So let's add some additional cases to see, like, if existing user is none, what if is not none, what if the existing user is none? Okay. Then we're going to return such user does not exist. User with that email address does not exist. Then if the password is not equal to the password, else we're gonna do return that password incorrect password. Okay. So let's just go over this one more time. So first things first, we grabbed the existing user. Then we checked, does it exist in the database? If it was none, if we said is none, we would know it doesn't exist. But is not none, it does exist. We continue. Does the user's password equal the password? Yes. Okay. Then you successfully logged in. Otherwise, incorrect password. And now, in this other else condition that's tied to this if existing user is not none, this one, in other words, if existing user is none. That's what this else indicates. User does not exist because we're trying to log in. Okay, let's try meho@gmail.com, I think was the user. And we'll just do a 123 password. And we hit login, incorrect password. Let's try 123 123. User doesn't exist. Perfect. Now let's just do the correct password. You've successfully logged in. Now you can access the home page. Perfect. Lovely stuff. However, nothing exactly is in our home page, and additionally, we don't necessarily actually log in necessarily. We kind of do log in, but we just get this message, and that's the only thing that changes. So previously we had imported session. Okay, we had imported session. I'm going to introduce something new. I'm going to introduce G, which allows us to add global variables to the global context of Flask. And this is something that we're going to be able to use in order to essentially to make users attached to the global context, just like we did with login user in session. However, every time we're going to check is there such a user in our before each of our requests. So we're gonna get to that in a moment. Okay, so register is good now, and what we're gonna want to do here is we're going to want to do session user ID. We're gonna save this user's ID to the session called session user ID, and we're going to simply do existing user.id. Okay, so instead of doing, in the past we've done logged in for the session, this time we're doing user ID, and we're going to save this, and we're going to make something called app.beforeRequest. Okay, we're going to call it before request. Okie dokie. At this point, we're just gonna pass it, and we're gonna do this, and there we go. Okay, so we have our login page. We just want to check if session user ID is not none. So this is going to be executed before every request. So before you go to any page, this is going to be basically executed. If the session user ID is not none, okay, then we're going to check for a user. We're going to check user equals user query filter by ID equals the integer version of session user ID. And we're going to grab that. This is basically like us checking the existing user with email. This time we're just doing it with ID, and we're making this session into an integer by wrapping it around with an int. We could perhaps simplify this by doing user ID equals like this. And we're just going to do user ID. Just a bit more readable. And now if user is not none, in other words, if there is such a user, we're going to do g.user equals user. And that is essentially what we're going for. And so when we save this, we are now going to have a global user simply by logging in, right? So when we go to user ID, existing user.id, let's give this a shot. So first things first, okay, what we're going to do in the index page is we're going to just do a new field that says if g.user, and it's been a while since I've done this implementation myself. I was only doing this while learning, so I'm going to be experimenting if this works. It just say you are currently logged in. So we'll just do an h2 that says you are currently logged in. And otherwise, we would want a h2 that says you are not logged in. Okay, let's see if we can get this first try. Okay. Okay, so it's saying there's no such a thing as user ID. Okay. So we got our first error. If session user ID is not none. Maybe let's try this one. There we go. That's more like it. Okay. So this will either give us none or it will give us the user ID. And let's give it a shot. So right now when we go to the home page, it tells us you're not logged in. So we're going to log in now. And we're going to do meho@gmail.com. And we're going to hit the login button. It says you've successfully logged in. You're currently logged in. Great. We actually sort of did it first shot, but not really because we got an error there with the session, the way that I implemented that. That's fine. When we refresh the page, you can see that it's going to tell us that we're logged in. How is this different from what we did previously? Well, guess what? We now have this g.user. We can access anything regarding the g.user, regarding the current logged in user using the g.user. Okay, let's show you what I mean. We could just do g.user.name, and we could just simply say welcome g.user.name. And when we refresh, it says welcome Meho. Okay, and take it one step further. If the person is logged in, we could show a completely different page in the home page. If g.user and we'll just do an end if and a else. I keep messing this up, but you are logged, or we'll just do the welcome here. And we don't need this one anymore, so we can just delete that. So if the person is logged in, if not g.user, if the person isn't logged in, it's going to show them the form. If they are logged in, it'll say welcome, and you can see we're simply able to access this name because we have basically put this global user, and we're going to be able to actually access that from all of our HTML templates now. And what's cool is we could attach methods to this by saying, for example, get email domain or something like that. And if we just did return self.email.split with the at, and we just did the second part of that, and we split that with the dot, or I don't know. Let's just not worry about that. Just do the splitting at the at, and that's the email domain pretty much. We're now going to be able to access that using that method. You have registered your email with the service. Just really the proof of concept. I don't know why you would ever do this, but g.user. What did we call it? Get email domain. Get email domain. Okay. When we refresh, it tells us you registered your email with the service gmail.com. Okay. And there's cool stuff you could do here even. You could do like length, for example, and you could check how long it is with Jinja and stuff. Of course, all of those still work. This has been perhaps a long, but I hope informative video on how to basically make your first functional web application with login. Until this point, there's a couple of stuff we're missing from this implementation. Firstly, obviously, we're not using any type of libraries, but to combat that, ideally, we should have passwords that are stored encrypted. We're also not encrypting our passwords, so we could install, for example, bcrypt and use that to encrypt and decrypt stuff. We're not doing that, so ideally we should have that implementation anyways, but I don't really want to get too much into that because I'd rather, if you're going to make applications, just get in the habit of using a library such as Flask Security 2. I think it's probably going to be better for you in the long run. So I'm not getting too much into that segment. Probably I don't know if I will make a video in the future, but right now everything is being stored unencrypted. So if anybody does get a hold of your database, they'll get unencrypted versions of basically every user and their emails and their passwords and vice versa. So yeah, that is something that in the future tutorials we're going to combat with implementing security libraries. But you could also combat it without security libraries yourself manually, though I think that your implementation probably won't be as good as if you were to use an established library already that's out there designated for that purpose. In any case, unless of course you're some Python master, then by all means. In any case, it's been a fun one. I think that we could end it here. in the next video, we should perhaps cover how to log out, because we currently don't have that. And gonna be seeing you guys in the next one, hopefully. Peace.